Mary of Nazareth was not born in glory. She was born in dust, in the dry hills of Galilee, where the wind whispered secrets to olive trees and the stones remembered war. It was the time of Caesar and Herod. A time of silence from heaven and noise from armies. The people of God waited, but they waited like people who had forgotten how to believe. In a small clay house near the edge of the market square, a young girl swept the floor. She wasn't thinking of history. She was thinking of how to be enough, in a world that expected so little. The house smelled of baking bread and tired wool. Morning sun spilled over the floor like honey. Mary, maybe 13, maybe 15, pressed her hands into the warm clay bowl. Her fingers moved like they had done this 1,000 times, but her heart was somewhere else. Nazareth was small, and girls grew up small within it. But she dreamed too far. She often looked at stars longer than she should. Her thoughts were not always quiet. She wondered what stories were written above her, and whether her name was among them. She felt a stretching, an ache she couldn't name. She never said these things aloud. What would they say? That she was ungrateful? That she was odd? Mary moved through the motions of a day like water slipping between stones, gentle, unnoticed, flowing. Her mother hummed in the next room, smoothing cloth. Outside she could hear the bray of a donkey, a pomegranate seller, and children shouting over figs. But inside her, a deeper sound pulsed, a silence too heavy to ignore, the kind that comes before something impossible. She didn't know she was being watched, not by people, but by eternity. There were many girls in Galilee. Many were purer. Some were prettier. Others stronger. But there was a reason heaven watched this one. She was ordinary, yes, but she listened. Not with ears, but with soul. And when Mary listened, it was as though the world held its breath to speak. One morning, as the sky cracked into lavender, and birds scribbled joy into the air, the silence snapped. She turned, and saw something impossible. Not a vision. Not a dream. A presence. Standing. Radiating. Breathing light. She wasn't asleep. She could smell the dust on the floor. Her hands went cold. Her breath shallow. And then, her heart began to race like it wanted to run from her chest. The light spoke, and its voice wasn't thunder. It was like water, deep, soft, dangerous. Hail, full of grace. Mary froze. Not because she was afraid of angels, she didn't even know it was one. She was afraid of what she would be asked to do. Her knees buckled but did not break. The angel told her the unthinkable, that she would carry the Messiah, the Son of the Most High. No man had touched her. She was not yet married. Her world shook. She said nothing. Not for a long moment. Not because she doubted, but because she felt the weight. Could she hold this without dropping it? Could she walk into disgrace, rejection, shame, for a child who would call God Father? She didn't weep. She breathed, like someone counting fire. Then she spoke, not with boldness, but with stillness sharp enough to split mountains. Let it be done to me according to your word. That moment changed history. No armies, no trumpet, no fireworks, just a girl who said yes to heaven, knowing it might cost her everything. The angel vanished. Her life, as she knew it, didn't. She didn't scream or sing. She swept the same floor. She baked the same bread. But now, she carried the unseen beginning of salvation in her body. And no one believed her. Joseph, the man betrothed to her, looked at her stomach like it was a lie. The neighbors whispered. Her mother cried. She said nothing. She carried the weight quietly, letting God speak through her silence. She walked every day like she was walking uphill, carrying something the world couldn't understand. She smiled at children, even as their mothers pulled them away from her. Her cousin Elizabeth welcomed her with joy, sensing the miracle, and called her blessed. For the first time, someone saw her without suspicion. Mary stayed with her 3 months, helping an old woman grow young with the weight of another miracle. But in the quiet of night, she often lay awake staring at the rafters, wondering if the promise would be kept, or if she would raise a child into exile, rejection, or death. She was brave, yes, but not without questions. She just chose to hold them, not speak them. Because sometimes, faith isn't about answers, it's about endurance. As her belly grew, so did the danger. Caesar called for a census. She and Joseph had to travel to Bethlehem. She was 9 months pregnant, riding a donkey over cracked roads and desert winds. Every bump was a breath held. Every mile, a test of will. There was no room when they arrived. Of course there wasn't. Not for the girl with the whisper of scandal and a stomach full of God. So she birthed the King of Kings beside cattle, under a sky cold with stars. There were no doctors. No gold-trimmed blankets. Just straw, blood, and breath. She held him, and he cried. She kissed his forehead, and he blinked. And for a moment, all of creation exhaled. Angels sang. Shepherds arrived. Even the animals grew still. But Mary? She stared at her child's face, not as a queen would look at a throne, but as a mother searching for the shape of her own soul. She didn't understand. How could this wrinkled, red-faced boy be the one promised? He was perfect, but so small. She was terrified to love him too much. She knew love would be dangerous now. Because the deeper the love, the deeper the sword. When they took him to the temple, the old man Simeon met her eyes. "This child will pierce hearts," he said. "And a sword will pierce yours too." She nodded, but inside, her spine turned to ice. "What sword? When?" She couldn't ask. She could only carry him and hope. Later, they fled into Egypt as Herod hunted children. Her baby's first steps were not in home or peace, but in exile. Every night she checked his breath. Every day, she memorized his smile in case it disappeared. This was no storybook life. This was a path built from shadows and promises. Nazareth felt foreign when they returned. The people remembered the whispers. Mary lived quietly, raising a boy who never did what others expected. He asked questions grown men couldn't answer. He stared at the sky too long. He disappeared once, and they found him in the temple, confounding scholars. She scolded him, but in her heart, a flicker of fear grew. This was not a child she could control. He belonged to something higher. And still, she cooked for him. Sewed his tunic. Kissed his scraped knees. She loved him the only way she knew, with her whole, terrified heart. The years passed. Mary aged, but she kept her quiet strength. She did not speak often, but her presence shaped those around her. Women came to her for guidance. Children felt peace in her shadow. She never called herself holy. She simply listened. And when the time came, when he left home to begin his ministry, she packed his things with trembling fingers. She smiled, but her hands shook. She wanted to beg him to stay. But she didn't. Love doesn't cling. It releases. And so, she let her son walk into a world that would not know what to do with him. She followed from afar. Watched him change water to wine, touch lepers, raise the dead, challenge rulers. She heard the rumors: blasphemer, madman, Messiah. Every name was a wound. Yet she said nothing. Her silence was not weakness. It was strength laced with sorrow. Because when you carried the Son of God, you learned to weep without sound. Mary was not a background figure. She was the quiet spine of a divine revolution. The world didn't see it. But heaven did. The angels watched her like they had at the beginning, still in awe of the girl who had once said, "Yes." Mary walked behind the crowds now, her sandals worn thin by the dust of his journey. Her son no longer belonged to her kitchen or the quiet hills. He belonged to fishermen, widows, strangers, enemies. She watched him disappear into towns and reappear in rumors. Her hands, once full of his needs, were now empty. That emptiness felt like exile. Sometimes she stood in the back of the crowds and saw people reach for him like he was a prize, not a person. And every time he healed, she felt joy and grief. Because she knew the world loved miracles, not martyrs. She heard what they whispered. He breaks Sabbath. He eats with sinners. He claims to be God. The words reached her like stones thrown against a closed door. She knew he was not mad. But she also knew truth was dangerous when shouted in the streets. Every parable he spoke twisted like a sword in someone's heart. Mary began to fear not just for his safety, but for his soul's burden. He was carrying more than she could imagine. And sometimes, when she saw him pray, she wondered if even he wished the burden would pass. There were moments of wonder too. Times he laughed. Times he sat by her fire again and let her wash his feet. He never stopped being her son. But she saw how tired his eyes had become, like a man walking towards something he could not stop. Even when he was silent, his silence was loud. It spoke of wars not yet fought, of deaths not yet claimed. And Mary, though she did not know how it would happen, began to mourn him while he lived. Because she could feel the ending coming like a storm beneath her skin. She saw the disciples loved him, but did not understand him. She saw crowds praise him with the same mouths they used to curse Rome. She saw how his words lifted hearts and made enemies of kings. She remembered Simeon's prophecy. A sword shall pierce your soul. She thought she had known the sword. Now she realized that was just the handle. The blade was yet to come. And it would not just cut. It would bury itself deep. But she kept walking behind him. Because love does not run from suffering. It walks beside it, no matter how slow the steps. Then came Jerusalem. She had feared that city since the beginning. It was where prophets died. Where temple stones echoed with betrayal. And he went there not to hide, but to shine. The donkey ride. The palm branches. The children shouting, Hosanna. But Mary saw beyond the pageantry. She saw the priest's clenched jaws, the Roman eyes watching. She saw the shadow of the cross flicker even as the sun shone. That night she could not sleep. She lay curled on a mat, eyes wide, heart pounding. Because the silence had changed again. Not like before the angel. This time it felt like goodbye. It happened faster than she expected. Or maybe slower, because time seems to stretch when pain is too big for the body. They arrested him at night. No warning. No witnesses. Just chains and torches and betrayal. Mary was not there, but she knew. Her bones told her. Her soul bent inward like something was dying inside her. When she heard, she did not scream. She rose, wrapped her shawl, and walked into the night. Not to stop it, she knew she couldn't, but to be near. Because mothers do not run from death. They lean in. Even if it breaks them. She found him bruised. Bound. Beaten. The crowd had gathered like vultures. He stood like a broken pillar between two soldiers. His face, swollen, bleeding, still carried the peace of heaven. Mary wanted to hold him, to wipe his wounds. But she stood still. If she cried, she feared he might not bear it. So she stayed silent. Every lash struck her soul. Every insult thrown at him stuck to her skin. When he fell, she fell inside. When they stripped him, her shame burned like fire. But she stood, steady, unshaking. Because he was not alone. Not while she breathed. They nailed him to the wood. And Mary watched the sky darken, not just above her, but inside her. Every hammer strike was a memory. His first steps. His first words. His laughter. Gone. Taken. Mocked. The blood poured. The people jeered. He looked down once, and though no words passed between them, a lifetime passed in their eyes. Love. Pain. A goodbye wrapped in eternity. And then silence. The earth shook. The sky cracked. And he was gone. Her son, her savior, hanged between two thieves, offered back to God by men who never knew what they had destroyed. They pierced his side, and the blood and water spilled, as if the world was being reborn through death. Mary stood beneath the cross long after the others had fled. She did not faint. She did not scream. Her eyes, though swollen and red, remained open. She had seen the beginning. She would see the end. Even if it burned her alive inside. A man named Joseph of Arimathea asked for his body. Gently, reverently, Mary followed. She held her son one last time, not as a baby, but a broken man. She wrapped him in linen, the same way she once wrapped him in cloth. The tomb was silent. Cold. Stone. It felt like the end of the world. Mary sat outside it for a long time. The others begged her to rest. But how could she rest when the light of her life had been sealed away? Her hands were raw. Her heart was torn. But she remained. Because love does not end at death. It keeps vigil. It watches through the dark. Hope didn't feel possible. But neither did forgetting. She whispered psalms under her breath, like lullabies for a buried king. She didn't know resurrection was coming. She only knew she had to stay. Then Sunday came. The women ran from the tomb shouting of angels, of life, of victory. Mary did not run. She walked. When she reached the tomb and found it empty, a different kind of silence filled her, not the silence of absence, but of awe. She didn't need to see him to believe. She had carried him once. She knew his heartbeat. If he was alive, the world had changed again. She closed her eyes and let the wind press against her cheeks like a kiss from heaven. He had risen. And with him, everything that had once been lost. Still, joy was not simple. It came with wounds. He had returned, yes. But not to stay. Mary saw him again, glorified, radiant, unbroken. But it was brief. Because he was not hers to keep. Not anymore. He belonged to the world now. To history. To eternity. She smiled when he ascended, though her hands longed to hold him again. Her grief did not vanish. But it transformed, from pain into purpose. She was no longer just his mother. She was the mother of all who followed him. She became the anchor in a stormy sea of doubt, a living pillar of faith. She joined the apostles, not as a queen, but as a quiet flame in the upper room. She prayed. She guided. She waited. And on Pentecost, when the Spirit descended like fire, she felt it burn away her last shreds of despair. The Church was born, and so was a new chapter of her life. She was not young now. Her face bore the lines of pain and the softness of wisdom. But her heart beat as strongly as ever. She spoke little. But when she did, her words were like oil over fire, healing, powerful, and never wasted. The disciples leaned on her. Not because she demanded it, but because her presence reminded them of him. She cooked their meals, washed their feet, prayed over their sorrows. She spoke of the manger, the wedding, the cross, not in boast, but in longing. She did not seek glory. She had no titles. Yet all who came near her felt as though they touched the edge of heaven. Children clung to her robes. Widows wept in her arms. Peter often watched her in silence, as if still wondering how she had borne it all without falling apart. But she had. And she continued to do so. Because Mary's strength wasn't loud, it was layered in endurance. Every morning, she rose before the others, whispering thanks. Every night she knelt, asking that her son's name be remembered in love, not fear. Her body grew frail. Her steps slowed. But her soul burned brighter than ever. She had no desire for statues or songs. She only wanted one thing, to keep saying yes to God, until her final breath. And in every yes 1,000 others found their own voice. Because that's what saints do. They awaken the courage in others. Even in her quietness, Mary faced trials. Persecution was rising. Friends were being jailed, scattered, killed. Sometimes she woke gasping, remembering the cross. But she never begged for rescue. Only for strength. She kept praying, kept comforting, kept waiting. And as more churches rose, more hearts believed, Mary faded gently from the public eye, not forgotten, but hidden, like roots under a mighty tree. Her story wasn't finished. But the stage no longer needed her to be seen. Her impact was etched into every heart that dared to love God with a quiet, fearless yes. Mary grew old slowly, like a candle that doesn't flicker even when the wind grows strong. Her hair grayed, her spine curved, but her eyes still carried the weight of the sky. She lived not as royalty, not as the mother of a king, but as a humble servant in a growing, suffering church. The apostles spread out like seeds across the nations, but many returned to her, when fears shook their courage or when the memory of his face fell too far away. She never told them what to do. She only reminded them of what he had done. The world was changing. Rome still ruled with iron fists, and believers were hunted like animals. But Mary remained a steady flame in the growing dark. She spent her days in quiet prayer and her nights in dreams too heavy for rest. Sometimes she would hold a simple cloth and remember the swaddling bands. Other times she stared at a cup and recalled the wedding at Cana. Everything reminded her of him, every sound, every smell, every quiet pause between words. The world was filling with his message, but she missed his voice, the one she had known before the crowds. She never asked for visions. But sometimes, heaven visited her anyway. A flicker in the lamp oil. A soft wind with no source. The creak of a floorboard when no one moved. And in those moments, Mary did not feel fear. She felt remembered. She knew that the God who had once grown within her still walked beside her. She lived simply, but each breath she took felt like the afterglow of eternity. And still, she suffered, not in body, but in soul. Because she had outlived many who walked with him. And each loss left a hollow space inside her. James was stoned. Peter imprisoned. Stephen martyred. Every name carved deeper lines into her grief. But she did not harden. She let sorrow wash her like rain over dry ground. She never said, "Why me?" She only whispered, "Let it be." Because she had given her life once and continued to give it in 1,000 silent offerings. She no longer wept outwardly. But in her prayers were oceans. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the cross again. Each time she opened them, she searched for signs of the kingdom her son had spoken of with so much fire.